Joining me now, a couple of former K2 colleagues with me. We have Katie Brown with us today. Elaine Lord is here as well. We have Jeff Ward and Jeff Edelson. Thank you guys for coming on the program today. And despite these folks being former K2 colleagues, this will be a fair representation of the story. I promise you that. That's the way we do it here on Your Voice, Your Vote. Your main concerns about the general public having access to this lake. Let's begin with you, Jeff.
I think the number one concern right now is safety, especially with as concerned paddleboard traffic. We have specific lake rules here that keeps all non-motorized traffic within 100 to 150 feet from shore, but there's also a state rule regarding paddleboards is that they're supposed to navigate close to the shoreline, and that's mostly because they're very difficult to see. They disappear into the background. If the sun is low in the sky, you don't see them. You know, there's really no enforcement. We don't have enforcement. We can remind them to stay close to shore and just make contact and say hello, but we have no enforcement standards, and there's nobody out there enforcing that.
Katie, your main concern?
Well, this is a very unique lake. You know, I mean, it's an urban lake surrounded by homes, so it's a pretty small lake for anyone who's ever been on it. So it is different than a lot of other bodies of water in that way with the amount of traffic that can come on it. I think, Steve, there's two pieces. First of all, safety, as Jeff said, but even before that, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit, you know, we feel strongly that, you know, the legal proceeding most recently got it wrong in this case, and so we do think it's a private lake. You know, we don't think it has the same characteristics as some of the other lakes, which goes into a lot about how the Lake Corporation and the water quality, the safety, all the things that come into play are all framed around that. And so I think our biggest concern is the lake was made public at this point in time, but with no thought going into how that was actually going to be carried out on a day-to-day basis in terms of the safety and the water quality and all the other pieces that go into keeping this lake looking healthy and beautiful and available to people to use. So, you know, there's a lot that goes into that, and it flipped overnight with no thought about how that would happen.
Elaine, what are your concerns?
My concern is, like Jeff's, safety. And we've seen a lot of scary situations out here. I saw a guy who was practicing free diving, and he popped up right next to a moving boat out there in the lake. And I know that they've said that the Marine Board hasn't really gotten a lot of calls regarding problems with safety, but that's because our own security force, or the Lake Patrol that we all pay for, has responded primarily to any problems. We had a kayaker that dumped right in front of our dock, and she was struggling. She had never kayaked before, and it was our Lake Patrol who came and got her out of the water safely.
Jeff, you're the legal mind here. What are your concerns?
Well, my concern is that we simply, as the Lake Corps, we have no authority to protect the safety of the boaters. We don't have the right to enforce rules against the public boaters. We don't have the right to ticket, to do much of anything. And the state and the city have essentially thrown up their hands and said, not our problem. And so ultimately it becomes a safety issue is the critical one.
Do we know how many non-lake residents have been on the lake since they gave them access earlier in the year? Do we know that yet?
We have numbers from the city park ranger. Now, I believe the park ranger's only been there about 4 days a week, and they said they estimated about 3,200 launches from
It's a constant parade past the homes.
It's somewhat of an estimate on their part, but yeah, it's quite a bit. It's a lot more on a sunny, hot day than on a rainy day.
And people have said that, well, gee, how can you tell whether these are people from the public who are coming on or if it's residents? But our kayaks all have a license specific to the lake, and so we really can tell who is from the lake and who is not.
Tell me the impact from these folks coming on, non-lake residents coming on. What kind of problems is that causing right now?
Well, I may not be the best to ask because I live the furthest from the access point, but the I'm going to get back to the problem I just described, and that is that our lake patrol can't manage the traffic. And on days when it's hot and people want to get on the lake from just from the public, we can't manage it. And if you know, Elaine points out that, you know, we've had some examples where the Lake Corp Patrol was there and able to intervene and keep people from getting serious injuries. But that's just fortuitous. We have no authority to do that, and we can't guarantee their safety.
I would add also, just to make sure everyone understands, that we're not trying to have the public live by different rules. It's the same safety rules we've all been living with for 70 years, or they have evolved over 80 years. And then the other side of the major problem that we saw this summer was mostly in Lakewood Bay, which is where the access point is. And there are several cabanas that are built out over the water, and the homes are right on the waterfront there. And you know, they've lost all privacy because of the people coming up and just hanging right outside their kitchen window, trying to fish underneath the home itself and bumping into their home, leaving fishing hooks all over on their docks and their boat lifts and things like that. That is the other
Who pays to maintain the lake now?
We do. The homeowners.
How costly is that? Can someone talk about that?
Thousands of dollars per person or per household every single year.
Yeah.
Our annual budget is about $2.5 million to maintain the lake. That's all of the things that go with maintaining, including water quality. If we didn't do it, there's no one who would do it. And if we didn't do it, this beautiful lake that you're looking at wouldn't look anything like this. It would look like pea soup on a good day.
Steve, and most recently, which made the news about an algae bloom, and then you know, the state sent out notice about that. That actually was the Lake Corporation that tested and discovered that and reported it to the state. So it is, you know, that's what we're talking about. There's a whole sort of focus on the water quality, on the safety. This is sort of a dedicated full-time operation to make sure that everything operates smoothly. So, you know, we are the ones who brought that forward. The corporation brought that forward, and, you know, which is funded by the people who live on the water or have access to it through easements, which are thousands of homes around Lake Oswego too. So there's a lot that goes into it in this community.
You had mentioned, Jeff, there was some misinformation released on the part of the plaintiff in this case. Can you talk about some of that?
Yes. You know, sort of the talking point is that the city spends a lot of money taking care of their stormwater system, and that's directly affects the lake, and that's maintaining the lake, which it's not. As I pointed out before, if this was Oswego Meadow instead of Oswego Lake, the city would still have to live up to the Clean Water Act. A lot of folks think this is just this big giant natural resource here. There was a natural resource which was about a third of the size of this lake. This lake is 25 feet taller, so we have 3 dams. There's a dam here. There's a dam on the Tualatin so that we can exercise our full power generation, right? There's a dam at our head gate at the top of our canal. There's a power generation facility because we are a power generating facility. This lake is 25 feet higher and maintained by us. So there's a lot of cost that goes into maintaining the whole lake, including safety, water quality, and things like that.
Where are we in the legal process right now? Is this under appeal still?
It is on appeal.
Okay.
The last I heard is the court reporter asked for some more time to produce the transcript. We're just waiting for that.
What do you think is going to happen here?
We wish we knew.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think that the Court of Appeals will give it some very serious consideration. Hopefully make the right choices, but I'm not going to try to predict it. I don't think we're going to get ignored by the Court of Appeals. I think that this is an issue that has been interesting to the public, if nothing else, and you know, hopefully the court understands it.
Who has to pay the legal fees here? Is it you folks, or is it the city of Lake Oswego, or who's paying that?
Well, we are. We're paying our legal fees in this case, which we volunteered to intervene in the case. because it so impacted us, but we weren't included initially in the lawsuit. So we have intervened, and of course we have to pay our own freight.
What concerns you the most if you think next June, next July, and it's still public access here? What concerns you about that? Folks on their paddle boards, got hundreds of people coming in. What worries you?
I think, just like Katie said, there needs to be more thought going into how that looks, how that access looks, and the rules by which everybody lives on the lake to keep everyone safe.
And that's for the people coming on as well. I mean, you know, we have concerns. We hear all the time, you know, Elaine talked about, and she lives in an area where she sees a lot more than, say, that I see on a daily basis. And I say that because we hear a lot of anecdotal stories about, you know, people who come on the lake and they just don't know, and they're not maybe paying attention, and they don't realize maybe the situation they're putting themselves into. You know, I just had heard from a friend who was out, you know, at dusk a couple weeks ago, and there were some paddleboarders in the middle of the lake, and they couldn't see them until they were right up on them, and everybody was very scared. Nothing happened, so nothing was reported, but there's just a lot of things like that. And I think everyone feels like until something comes into play, that we have a way to educate, that we have a way to enforce, and there's some accountability, that it's a little bit of a ticking time bomb until like something happens that's going to be very regrettable, and we do not want that to happen.
And the state isn't paying for any enforcement. The county, the city, we're the ones who are bearing the cost.
Has there been any talk of charging some of these folks, these public folks that come in? Maybe they pay for a sticker for the summer or something like that. Any chatter about that?
It's been brought up. I think the city is concerned that they lose their recreational immunity if they charge a fee, and so their liability risk would go way up if they charged a fee for entry or for a permit or anything like that.
So the irony is that there really are few rules that apply, and even fewer rules that are applied to the public. That the city is doing everything they can to protect its own immunity from liability, and the public is coming in without signing any liability waivers, which would be standard in just about any other circumstance. But we don't have the ability to demand or require any of that. The court just sent the public off to do whatever they wanted.
Can they only access at Millennium Plaza Park? Is that the only place right now?
Yes.
Is that a good thing that that's the only access at this point?
Well, let me tell you an irony about that choice. So the court found that the original Sucker Lake, which, as Jeff said, was about a third or maybe a half of the entire body that we now have, and considerably lower, but far to the west from Lakewood Bay and Millennium Park, that's the only part the court said is subject to the public trust doctrine. But the court then went on to say, well, in order to get there from Millennium Park, the public is free to travel through Lakewood Bay. Lakewood Bay is Millennium Park is nearly a mile from the original Sucker Lake. So this is the extraordinary thing the court did, is that they said that the city has to open up their park so that people can travel a mile to get to Sucker Lake. The reality is very few people are ever actually getting to Sucker Lake. And when you talk about safety and you talk about what the practical impact of this has been, is that the vast majority of the people never leave Lakewood Bay. So they never leave this man-made bay that nobody disagrees with, that was built on deeded property, that was privately built, privately funded, privately maintained, and is not subject to the trust doctrine. That's where the public is going, and that's the irony.
You know what some folks at home are thinking, right? You know, there's some of these people live on the lake. They don't want Joe Average coming onto their private lake. What do you say to them?
I will say that not everyone here is rich. Our family built here in the 30s. It's almost 90 years on the lake, 3 generations, and we can tell you, back then when my in-laws built here, it was not like this. And there are still some families around here who don't have a lot of money. Yes, there are a lot of big homes, ostentatious places, but not everyone has money.
And Steve, I'd also say, because I have lived in Lake Oswego, the city, for almost 20 years. And the first half of that, off the lake in, property that didn't have access through an easement. So I lived on, property and then moved on to part of the water. So I've sort of experienced it from both sides. And so I would also say, for everyone, not even just for people, for this entire community and the entire region, this lake is a really precious resource. And I think that's one of the things that also gets lost in the story is the Lake Corporation is really here as a steward of the lake. It really is to maintain this body of water, which serves in so many ways, not only the center of the city, it attracts people to the city. We take pride in the great schools that we have in the city. It all kind of has grown out of this lake, and we take that responsibility really seriously to continue to steward that lake.
Is there a solution that would make both sides happy, do you think? Is there one you see?
I'm smiling because we did make some effort to try to achieve that, and it wasn't possible. I'll just leave it at that.
Anybody else? Is there a solution you see that would make you happy?
Well, I would hope at a minimum that there would be some coming together to figure out a plan that makes sense to, again, we talked about it's a pretty small urban body of water, to take into account the number of people at a time, the understanding, the rules, the enforcement, to have a plan to make sure that this was safe for everyone involved.
If you lose this next appeal, what happens then? Is it just done, or can you take it to a...
Well, you can seek review from the Supreme Court, or they can seek review, which would be my preference. Because that means we won at the Court of Appeals. And I can't guess what the Supreme Court would do, and it would depend on the decision and any number of other things that's way out of our control.
And it's worth pointing out that sometimes gets missed in the story is that this went on for a long time because actually the initial court proceedings did not go in favor of the plaintiffs, and it went to the Supreme Court because of that and came down to some issues. So it has had a long legal journey because there have been differing opinions and different viewpoints at any certain point in time that has led to this point. It's been to the Supreme Court once on certain issues. So, potentially could go back for another issue, but it has not been clear cut from the beginning. There's a lot tied into this that's a little more complicated than it might appear on the surface and then it's been presented by the plaintiffs sometimes.
Have you had discussions with the plaintiff in this case, you folks?
We have initiated a process that hit a dead end.
I want to give you all a chance to say a final word before we move on. I want to begin with you.
Well, I would just echo again what Katie said about some reasonable expectations for safety protocol and numbers of people would be something that I think everyone could live with down the road, depending on where this case goes. But it feels like we're the only ones trying to get there.
I would also say, one thing that's come out over time, I understand this has been in a lot of social media that I've seen other places is, and probably the part about it that's bothered me that has felt very disingenuous is there's been a lot brought up about racism or elitism or that this is tied into this. And, Oregon, I consider Oregon home, but I was not born here. I moved here in my 20s. And, some of the things that have been talked about deed restrictions, that's part of Oregon's history. That's not just Lake Oswego's history. That's a state, something that went on the state. That has never been, we've never had anything on this lake or specifically that has tied into that. And so I think it's been, really deflating to a lot of people who care about this community, care about this lake and want to do the right thing to have been put in this bucket that somehow we're just trying to keep people off. And that's not at all what this is about.
Elaine?
Mm-hmm. My biggest concerns, safety, rules, liability. There really needs to be something in place to keep everyone safe, no matter whether it's the public or us. We have our rules that we've laid down for each other, and we're accountable to those rules. The public comes on, they don't know the rules, aren't familiar with them, and we've put those in place to keep everyone safe, and we wish that there were a mechanism to get everyone to follow safety rules.
I'm going to end with you, Jeff.
Thank you. So I'll tell you what I don't see this as. This should not be an issue of politics. It really isn't a matter of what this person wants or that person wants. We have a body of law. The court, in my opinion, elected to ignore it or to change it in their own way, which whenever that happens at the trial court level, it's going to get considerable scrutiny, one would hope, at the higher courts. And so I think if we follow and if the courts follow the rule of law, I think we'll unravel some of these problems that we've been talking about.
I think we're good.
Can I just ask one question?
Yeah, absolutely you can.
Can the public go anywhere they want on the lake, or are
Yeah.
they supposed to stay within a certain? They can. They
No,
just
they
have to
can.
go in that one entrance, but then they can go anywhere they
Yes.
want.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And they
Yeah.
all end up partying right off my dock. So, like 25 feet from where I'm eating.
But what Jeff was alluding to though is the original Sucker. The original Sucker Lake, which Jeff had talked about, is actually far away from the access point, right? But what the court, and that's where they sort of had created new law, was, you know, even though there was this man-made body, everybody knows Lakewood Bay was added privately. In order to get to that place a mile away, as Jeff alluded, they'd have to launch there. But nobody's actually getting there, right? For understandable reasons, they are mainly staying in Lakewood Bay or close outside of Lakewood Bay.
Going to
Outside
my
of
house.
Going to Elaine's house. But they're not, the whole intent was to give access to this apparently original lake that the court let out, but that's not how
That's not what happened.
that's not what's happening.
It's like someone had a driveway easement across your property to get to their property, and they came out and just hung out on the driveway on your property and had a picnic every weekend instead of going to their property.
Let me ask you this question then. Have you thought about moving? Does that cross your mind?
This is home. This is our home. We've been here for so long. Like I said, 3 generations of our family has been here. We're entrenched.
And we live in different places. I live pretty far away, so I don't see the effects of it personally. But it's bigger than that, because again, like I said, this isn't just for us. This is for the people coming on. We want people to be, at this point, if they're going to come on, we want it to be safe. We want it to be a safe environment, and we want to preserve this beautiful resource. That's why we are here. Because again, this lake means a lot to this community, not just to the people who live on it, to the entire community, and we feel a real responsibility to keep that going.
I think we're good.
Yeah, we're good. We're great. Thank you.
You-
Katie, can I ask you one question? You said,
Yeah.
I think I saw something online about the statistics from the year before it was
Yeah.
allowed to the public. Can you kind of elaborate on that, or what is that, like a percentage?
Yeah, well, we keep safety statistics. We have a full safety committee that reviews and keeps things going, and we have going back 6 years of data, and so there was 103% increase in mornings and Lake Patrol talking to people, mainly for public users who would come in, again, because we know based on who has stickers and who doesn't. And so again, it just speaks to the fact that there's just a lot of information people don't know, or they're just not educated to know how they should be safe. And even the plaintiff in the case has said, fully agree that people should be staying between the buoys and the shoreline for safety, but they're not doing that. And that's one of the big problems.